To begin the symposium, Dr. Rex Weeks, of Eastern Cherokee descent and an archaeologist, will summarize some of the key enduring contributions of anthropologist A. Irving Hallowell. Hallowell did give soul-like essences a primary place in the logic of Ojibwa ontology and behavior, and in understanding non-Western peoples generally. Dr. Weeks comes to us as a teacher willing to share his native insights with a Western audience. Do not be surprised to hear some pointed criticism. Dr. Weeks's paper is entitled Come as Strangers, Leave as Friends, an invitation to A. Irving Hallowell's essay on Ojibwa ontology, behavior, and worldview for soul-searching archaeologists.
Philadelphia, or the City of Friends, gave us the remarkable American anthropologist A. Irving Pete Hallowell, 1892 to 1974. His fieldwork among the northern Ojibwa, particularly the Berens River Band of eastern Manitoba and western Ontario during the Great Depression era, profoundly changed philosophical approaches to ethnography. He took the attitude that the Ojibwa had sensible ways of being which were ontologically evident in their language, worldview, and everyday behaviors. For Hallowell, anthropology had a tremendous amount to learn about humanity in general, and from the Ojibwa in particular, by conscientiously avoiding the rote projection of Western tropes when empirical evidence appears to be indicative of something otherwise. His ideas have important implications for archaeologists today. In this presentation, let us consider some insights about personhood and souls from Hallowell's most celebrated essay, Ojibwa Ontology, Behavior, and Worldview. Since its initial publication by Columbia University Press in a 1960 Freschheft for his mentor Paul Radin, entitled Culture and History, Hallowell's essay, hereafter referred to as Ojibwa Ontology, became a standard reading for students of anthropology. Have you read it? Unfortunately, it has largely been passed by, and few archaeologists know it. Unfortunate because it will help you come to terms with naïve realism, the tendency to assume that people everywhere somehow see the world in the same way you do. A major takeaway point to glean from Ojibwa ontology is that scientific descriptive language matters. In particular, the use of the terms natural and supernatural severely hampers understanding of personhood and souls as fundamental determinants of motivation and behavior in Ojibwa and broader woodland Indian societies. As Hallowell, 1960, page 28, aptly put it, the term supernatural, if applied to the characters of Ojibwa narratives, is completely misleading if for no other reason than the fact that the concept of the supernatural presupposes a concept of the natural. The latter is not present in Ojibwa thought. It is unfortunate that the natural-supernatural dichotomy has been so persistently invoked by many anthropologists in describing the outlook of peoples other than their own. Look at the painting before you. Norvel Morceau, Ojibwa artist extraordinaire, and the grandfather of the contemporary woodland art style, painted it in the 1990s. A Western observer is likely to describe what they see, wherein, from the cultural linguistic standpoint of the Ojibwa, it is going to be about who. Hallowell found this true long ago through his innovative use of Rorschach test to elicit conversations with the Ojibwa. In the history of Western thought, Hallowell departs from the Cartesian distinction of subjective mind and objective matter by demonstrating those notions of personhood and souls that transcend humanness, by way of examples drawn from the everyday lives of the Ojibwe. Ideas about personhood and souls have the potential to be dialogically extended to beings whom Hallowell referred to as other than human persons, in English, or the Manitou in Ojibwe. For the Ojibwe, the central goal of existence is Bimadezawin, which is to live a long, healthy life to its fullest extent. According to Hallowell, 1960, page 45, Bimadezawin is achieved with the effective help and cooperation of both human and other than human persons, as well as by one's own personal efforts. Hence, persons, and souls too, belong to a class of beings with whom one can form a social relationship, including some, but importantly not all, creatures, plants, stones, weather, and celestial bodies, as well as the Adaskananok, or traditional narratives, spoken into being seasonally and revered in kinship terms as our grandfathers. According to Hallowell, such is the solidarity of kinship, social relations imbued with ethical character among the Berens River Ojibwe, and among them and other than human persons. The Berens River Band of Ojibwe, who Hallowell befriended, called themselves the Anishinaabe, or the original people. They speak varieties of the Central Algonquin language family along with the Adawa, Potawatomi, Menominee, and many other American Indian tribes in the United States and First Nations in Canada. In Anishinaabe traditions, their homeland extends from the coast of the northeastern woodlands to the Great Plains. Hence, the Anishinaabe descendant communities have valuable insights for archaeology, to which the symposium aspires. The Berens River Ojibwe reside on the east side of Lake Winnipeg, near the border of Manitoba and Ontario. Get to know the Anishinaabe personally. Willie Berens was the chief of the Berens River Band from 1917 to 1947. He generously shared much of his Anishinaabe ways and wisdom with Hallowell. This photograph of Willie Berens and Pete Hallowell is labeled Grandfather's Rock, and at the time of its making was accompanied by another photograph with the chief sitting beside a shrine of rounded rocks with offerings. Willie and his great-grandfather Yellowlegs, who built the shrine, called the rocks ancestral grandfathers, and experienced them as such, as persons who are vested with memories and stories, and who share them with those, like Willie and Yellowlegs, who are gifted enough to hear them. Mark and remember, the future of North American archaeology depends upon directing attention to indigenous descendant communities' traditions with deference to their words and ways, Sinchu, Gary Palmer, and Del Himes, as a source of inquiry and explanation. The narratives of descendant communities offer an opportunity to embrace diversity and initiate collaborative efforts whereby everyone can gain new insights about the archaeological record rather than continue with another trite recital of Western naive realism. Ojibwa Ontology is a great place to start with such a thought experiment. I think it can be outlined by 4 principles. They involve coming to terms with the nuances of inner vitalities, outward appearances, social relations, and life experiences. Inner vitalities, the first principle, are characterized by sentience, volition, memories, and communications, expressly voiced, The Ojibwe refer to this inward precept as the Ajatakatawin. In various circumstances, such as dreaming, suffering from illness, conjuring, or dying, the Ajatakatawin can detach from the miya, or outward appearance, which Hallowell, 1960, page 41, respectively glossed as soul and body. One may quibble over Hallowell's diction concerning the body and soul. Yet, what is one to make of the relational distinction in the native tongue of the Ojibwe? Outward appearances, the second principle, are fleeting, and thus they are inherently deceptive due to the potentialities for metamorphose and its ambiguities. Hence, the relationship between the Ajatakatawin and Miyo become the basis of influence and equality, or power by degree, if you will, among persons. The Manadug have the greatest ability to transform, and are therefore the most powerful. Third, social relations among people, Anishinaabeg or otherwise, are created through the iteration of reciprocity, mutual obligations, responsibilities, and the formation of solidarity with kinship. Ethics are the basis of social relations and integral to their study, one of the themes of this symposium. Furthermore, social relations are conditioned and tempered by life experiences, the fourth principle, situations and circumstances, which make for reputations and require personal testimony to substantiate or to reach consensus in matters of diplomacy. Consequently, strangers must be received with kindness and caution. Perhaps Hallowell, 1960, page 43, said it best in his synopsis of Ojibwe personhood. Speaking as an Ojibwe, one might say all other persons, human or other than human, are structured the same as I am. There is a vital part which is enduring, and an outward appearance that may be transformed under certain conditions. All persons, too, have such attributes as self-awareness and understanding. I can talk to them. Like myself, they have personal identity, autonomy, and volition. I cannot always predict exactly how they will act, although most of the time their behavior meets my expectations. In relation to myself, other persons may vary in power. Many of them have more power than I have, but some have less. They may be friendly and help me when I need them, but at the same time, I have to be prepared for hostile acts too. I must be cautious in my relations with other persons, because appearances may be deceptive. Abstract concepts must be illustrated by salient examples. Let us consider 4 from Ojibwa Ontology. In the first, Hallowell, 1960, page 24, gives a linguistic sketch bearing upon the anthropological Whorf-Sapir debate. Since stones are grammatically animate, I once asked an old man, "Are all stones we see about us alive?" He reflected for a long while and then replied, "No, but some are." Hallowell goes on to describe situations in which stones have been observed to move by his Ojibwe friends. For this reason, Ojibwe language allows for animation, while refraining from dogmatically ascribing it to so-called inanimate objects. To invoke animism here is about as unuseful as the terms belief and supernatural are to Ojibwe worldview. They prevent the analyst from acquiring native knowledge by relegating an object to a fixed Western class supposedly unknowable to Westerners. Here, I part ways happily from the new animism movement in archaeology and anthropology. In the second instance, Hallowell, 1960, page 29, shows how the Ojibwe speak of kinship with Gijis, or the sun. The first old man said to his companion, "It is about sunrise now, and there is clear sky. You tell the sun to rise at once." So the other man said to the sun, "My grandfather, come up quickly." Rather than a natural celestial sphere in the Western scientific sense, the sun is reverenced as a person with the kinship term of greatest respect in Ojibwe language, which is grandfather. Gijis is a Manadu, who gives warmth and light to his grandchildren. Sometimes the sun is given the title of Great Spirit, or Giche Manadu, but in Ojibwe narratives, his power is found to be equal with that of Shell, or Gijis, who resides in the deepest waters. The Berens River Ojibwe did not have a concept of a supreme god, but rather many beings of varying power who differed in their friendliness situationally. In a third case, Hallowell, 1960, page 34, describes a conversation between an old couple and thunder. There was one clap of thunder after another. Suddenly, the old man turned to his wife and asked, "Did you hear what was said?" "No," she replied, "I didn't catch it." Hallowell explains it was midsummer. This is the time of year when the co-occurrence of migratory birds and storms reach their highest frequency. Apparently, the old man thought he'd heard the voice of the Benesi, or thunderbird, but had not understood what it had said. A Benesi is Manitou too, but less powerful than Gijis or Mijis. In the fourth and final example, Hallowell, 1960, page 45, conveys the central explanatory theme for the Ojibwe. In 1940, when a severe forest fire broke out at the mouth of the Berens River, no Indian would believe that any impersonal or accidental determinants were involved. Somebody must have been responsible. Hallowell calls this Ojibwe view of the world a personalistic theory of causation. The view is strongly taken in death of kin. Imagine living in a place where who, rather than what, is responsible. The world suddenly becomes an environment whereby ethical relations among persons are paramount. I have often wondered about the extent to which something like a personalistic theory of causation might be at the heart of the grand condolence ceremonies that seem to have transpired during the woodland period. For whose sake were the burial mounds, lavish funerary accoutrements, monumental earthworks, and great roads built in Ohio? Whose lack of reciprocity, failure to meet obligations, shrugging of responsibilities, and/or the breakdown of solidarity of kin brought an end to the wonders of the Scioto Valley? Does Hopewell art show other than human persons? Which stones most likely might have held grammatically animate significance to Middle Woodland peoples? Ha! I imagine mica, sometimes, and maybe. If we assume that the Ojibwe inherited a modicum of their words and ways from the woodland predecessors, then archaeologists can begin to ask new questions in the vein of Hallowell's thought experiment. Archaeologists might even be pleasantly surprised to find there is a lot to be learned by simply availing themselves to a host of possibilities that remain unsung, so long as they are tethered to their naive realism. I welcome the presentations that follow. Thank you for your kind attention and intentions. Be Matizawin to all.